Hello from Freedom Group, and in this video, we're going to talk about if you got the ERC credit from the IRS, why you're going to have to pay more taxes. To help me in this topic, I'm going to bring in my coworker, Carmen. Carmen, how are you?
I'm doing great again. How are you?
Good. Carmen is our ERC expert. She has been doing ERC work now for 3 years, Carmen?
Since the credit came out, yep, back starting in 2020,
Wow.
second quarter 2020.
Which is interesting because a lot of people think this ERC credit is new, but it's actually not. It's been around for 3 years now.
Yes, there's two different points of view. People think that it's new and it isn't, and people think it's too late to get it and it's not. So we're right in the middle.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So Carmen, a lot of people unfortunately are getting scammed when getting this ERC. A lot of companies are offering this ERC service and they are not advising these business owners well, and they're not advising and they're not telling them the consequences of getting this ERC credit, especially that if you get the credit, you may have a big tax bill coming up. So basically, I heard that this credit isn't considered income. So why can that lead to paying more taxes?
Okay, great question. So you're right. The credit is not considered income, and that's not how you would code it in the accounting when the money is received. It's a reimbursement, basically. Okay, so it's not coming in as income. So your gross income for the year is not going to change. However, the deduction that you took that year for your salaries and wages, that's going to go down, just like any other thing you get reimbursed for. Okay, so say an office or a business bought a computer and it costs $1,000 and they bought it in September. Well, in their financials, it's going to show $1,000 deduction in office expense. But then, in 2 weeks, they go back and return it. So then it's going to come back as a deposit. So it's going to cancel out and it's going to be zero. So when you look at the profit and loss, it's going to say zero expense because it didn't happen if you got reimbursed. So that's what happens with the credit. Whenever you get it, you have to, amend your taxes, which is something that people are not clear on. It's going to reduce the wages or the expenses, right? The deduction that was taken for salaries and wages by however much you got on the credit. So if you reduce the deduction, that means there's more left over for profit, okay? Or less of a loss. So that's definitely going to mean potentially that you're going to have to pay more taxes.
Wow. So when do you reduce the salaries and wages? Do you reduce it when you get the money?
No, that's another great question. So
Okay.
Look at where we are. We're in 2023, right? And a lot of people are amending their returns, getting their credits this year, maybe even next year, right?
Okay.
However, the law states, right, the IRS Notice 2021-49, specifically on page 24, if you want to be technical, that you are going to have to amend the year, right, and reduce the deduction the year the wages were originally paid. So if you're using 2020 wages to calculate the credit and you receive the credit, then that year when those wages were paid, that's the year you must amend to reduce the deduction. So you don't amend it in 23 or in 24 or whenever you got the credit, you amend the year where those wages originated.
Wow. So basically, if somebody uses or gets the ERC credit for wages claimed for 2020, they need to go back and amend their 2020 business tax return.
Correct.
And if it's an S corp, they need to amend their business tax return and their personal tax return.
That's right. And not only 2020, because if you amend 2020 and your net profit changes, then that's going to change your starting numbers for the following year. So it's a little bit of a domino effect. So if you say you only got it in 2020, you have to amend 20, 21, and 22 if you haven't done those yet, which I hope you have because we're very like a week away from the extension deadline. So yes, it is a ripple effect. And therefore, all those K1s are going to change. So that's something that you also have to keep in mind when you look into this credit and you focus on how much you're getting back. Well, how much are you going to have to change and pay for to amend? And how much is that going to make you owe more in taxes? These are all things you have to consider before saying, you know what, I'm going to apply for this credit and it's worth it.
Okay. So obviously they need to change in the accounting their salaries and wages, which is what they're claiming for the credit. So what's included in salaries and wages?
Okay, so salaries and wages makes reference to wages that are paid that are subject to FICA tax. Okay.
Okay.
So to put it in layman's terms, if you're paying a worker and you are deducting Social Security and Medicare from them, right? They get a W 2 at the end of the year. That's what's considered salaries and wages. So, of course, we leave the subcontractors out of it, right?
Okay.
Which brings just this week, I have to add this as caution to everybody. One of these aggressive companies, right? We had a gentleman call to get more information about the credit. He wanted to confirm that he couldn't qualify because he only paid 1099 subcontractors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I confirmed. I said, yes, indeed, you don't qualify because you did not have payroll in 2020 or 21. So the person was saying, okay, fine, I kind of had that feeling, but the company was telling me, they kept emailing me, kind of harassing him. They kept following up because they want to make the sale. And they were telling him that they could turn those 1099s for 2020 or 2021 into payroll, right? So they, instead of having those 1099s, they would cancel the 1099s, go back and do retroactive late payroll.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, what a mess. Everybody who received the 1099, say he had 10 people, not only is he going to have to amend his taxes to right account for the credit, but everybody who gets a 1099 who originally got a 1099 but now they want to give them a W2, they would have to amend all their taxes. And not only that, this credit and this whole idea was issued, the spirit of the law was to help people with what happened back then. If a business had employees and they retained them, so how are you going to go back and file payroll late? The IRS is going to receive it all this year. Like, if they're not going to notice that, if you get audited, they will absolutely disallow that.
That's
So
just
yeah, it sounds good on paper.
super
It
rough.
mathematically works, but that's a disaster. Like, don't even touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So we now know that if you get the credit, you need to go back and amend the tax returns of the year that you're claiming the credit.
correct.
So do I need to wait till I get the money to make the amendment, or when do we amend those tax returns?
You don't have to wait. Probably the IRS wants you to do it right away, right? Because you can amend them as soon as you know the amount. If you're going to somebody who is reputable and you're confident in the amount that you're going to get, that's the true amount, then you can go ahead and amend them right then and there. However, maybe just to play it a little bit, not so that it's a little bit more comfortable, because again, you're going to amend the taxes and you potentially could have a tax liability at the end of that amendment. You may not have the money to pay for that. Maybe you're counting on the ERTC to come in to pay for it. So, maybe don't do it right away, but do it, maybe 3 months out. Just don't forget to do it. My fear and my caution, I want to caution everybody, is that they get the money, they get all excited, and then they forget to go back and amend them. And that's gonna come back and blow up. So just don't forget, try to do it as soon as possible. As soon as you know the amount, you can amend.
Okay. So basically, Carmen, if I am a business owner and I decide to apply for the ERC and I see that I am eligible to get a credit
Mm-hmm.
for 2020, and I also qualify for an ERC credit for 2021. And I do decide to move forward, and I know, okay, based on the accounting, I'm gonna get $80,000 of ERC credit. So now that I know that, I need to go back and amend my 2020 business tax return, my
Correct.
2021 business tax return. If I'm an S corp, I need to amend my 2020 personal tax return
Mm-hmm.
and my 2021 tax return. Since I'm claiming the credit, now my net profit for those years is higher, and now I'm gonna owe taxes for
Mm-hmm.
2020 and 2021. So is all that worth it to get the ERC credit?
That's the $1 million question, right? And that is one thing that at least we hear. We do this service in phases because it may not be. It may be you may just break even. So why go through all this hassle just to end up with $1,000 extra or something? I don't know whatever amount would make it not worth it for you, right?
Okay.
But you have to take into account how much you're getting back, how much they're charging you for the service.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard some of these places are charging crazy amounts.
Yeah.
But anyways, the amount of the service, the amendments that you have to do on all of these tax returns. Maybe you're not the only owner. Maybe it's an S corp and you have five owners, so they're all going to have to amend. So you have to think about all these things. Think about how much more taxes you're going to have to pay, and then compare that to the credit. Oftentimes, it's absolutely worth it. I mean, there's cases where people are getting back $150,000, and it's just going to, it's going to take up between fees and taxes $50. So they're still ending up with $100. So absolutely, that's worth it. Mm-hmm. But some other cases, it's not. And one thing I wanted to add, don't get scared by the fact that your profit's going to go up. Remember, it's not always going to make you pay taxes. I had a case where the person had a big loss and he couldn't take the whole loss anyway due to his basis limitation, right?
Okay.
So what all this did was make the loss less big, but it still didn't affect him. He paid 0 additional tax on his personal taxes because his basis was 20, right? Say he could only take $20,000 of a $80,000 loss. And this credit made it so that the loss was 60,000. Well, he could only take 20 anyway, so it didn't affect him. So it's not always going to make you pay taxes, but it's a big potential.
Okay. So basically the takeaway is every case is different.
Every case is different.
And then just know that if you're getting pitched by one of these companies saying that you're eligible for this credit, make sure that you're working with a professional. Mm-hmm. Because we hear a lot of stories of people that are not eligible and now they're getting this credit.
Yes.
And then the risk is the IRS is going to audit. The IRS is going to find out you weren't eligible for this credit, and now you're going to have to return the money with penalties and interest.
Yes.
But even if these companies tell you and you're sure you are eligible for this credit, make sure that you know that now you need to go back and amend your business tax return. Mm-hmm. That may result in a tax liability. So you need to know exactly, okay, I'm getting this much in credit, but now I need to know how much am I going to pay for the service?
Correct.
How much am I going to pay for make the amendments? How much is going to be my tax liability? And now you know, okay, these are my costs for getting credit, and this is how much I'm really gonna end up with, and
exactly,
and make a decision if it's worth going through that process, right?
Yes.
Perfect.
And part of that decision making, because some people they just don't feel comfortable looking at their taxes themselves and making that decision on a personal level. Consult if you have already an accountant that you trust, right? Or even if you don't, but that's the person who did your tax returns, right? And you want to do this credit and you're going to some other company to do it, right? So please communicate with your original tax preparer or accountant and tell them what you're doing. Don't just go do it and then tell them, oh, how is this going to affect me? Because then it's too late. Yeah. So communication is key. If you're using different parties, go back to your accountant and tell them what you're planning on doing and get that advice as well. Okay?
Okay, perfect. So if someone right now, if someone's watching this video and they're not sure if their ERC was done correctly, or if they're planning on getting it and they want to make sure to get it correctly, what should they do?
Well, they can absolutely call us. Okay, so the number's right on the screen, 407-344-1012. We can do an evaluation of your case. If you already got it, we can just kind of reevaluate it and do the quote like if we were going to do it to see if the numbers match. And if they don't, then we would advise accordingly, depending on what that situation is. Because again, this is not a one size fits all. This affects every business in a unique way.
Perfect. So now you know, getting the credit may result in a big tax liability. Yes. Just make sure it's being done correctly and make sure that you don't get in trouble with the IRS for claiming a credit that you weren't supposed to get. All right. So thank you for watching this video. If you have received value out of this information, like it and share it with another business owner. Carmen, thank you very much.
Always at your service. Always a pleasure.
Very good. God bless. Bye bye.
God bless you. Bye bye.